Welcome to the Affirming Village Podcast, where we center neurodivergent voices, affirm diverse ways of being, and empower families, educators, and advocates with knowledge that truly honors the whole learner. We're your co-hosts, Dr. Destiny Huff, a late diagnosed autistic ADHD mental health therapist and non-attorney special education advocate, and Lisa Baskin-Wright, an ADHD and dyslexic educator and IEP coach. Together, we dig into conversations about neuroaffirming practices, special education, and disability rights. Please remember, nothing shared on this podcast is medical or legal advice, and the views shared here by the host and the guest are their personal opinions. This space is for educational purposes only, to help you feel informed, empowered, and never alone in the village. Welcome back to the Affirming Village Podcast, and today's conversation is a personal one. It's called Something Shifted This Year.
Yeah, because we've both been sitting with this idea that this school year has just felt different.
Not perfect, not easy, maybe a little bit hard, but definitely different.
Yeah, and it feels like not just in what has happened, but in how we've been showing up within it.
Absolutely. How we've had to respond, the things that we've had to push back on that we maybe haven't had to push back on before. And I know in conversations we've had, we didn't carry it the same way that we have in the years previously.
Yeah, there were things this year that a few years ago just wouldn't have necessarily risen up. And so this year's advocacy just has been different.
So today we're talking about that shift, what felt different this year in parenting, in advocacy, and in navigating school systems.
So if you are here and listening, things might still feel really heavy, and change doesn't always mean things get easier. Sometimes it means you're just moving differently within it.
Sometimes it shows up as you moving differently inside of it, and that's what this conversation is about. So let's get into it.
Oh my gosh. It's like there's so much to say, and yet I almost don't even know where to start. I think you, right? I mean, I think you and I both, right from the jump, were like, something smells different this year.
Yes.
I can't put my finger on it. What is it?
Yeah, I think probably we kind of knew getting ready to just go into the school year that things were going to shift, right? And one of the things that I think is important to know, one, disability is political. And so whether you want it to be or not. And so anytime there is an administration change, there's going to be a change to how disability is addressed, how it's funded. And that always ties into education and, that administration's priorities or views. And so I think that just some of the things that we had seen in the past with current administration, there was cause for concern.
Yeah.
And then we actually, unfortunately, got to see that unfold in real time and see how that actively was impacting our advocacy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's no way to have this conversation without naming the broader landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, whether it's trying to shutter the Department of Education, whether it's the lawsuit trying to dismantle Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, like there's so much intersectionality, right? Like things that are really sort of specific to education. And we talked about this in episode 5, because I think we were feeling it so much this year, but what's happening in terms of immigration, what's happening in terms of, oh my God, I could like laundry list a million things, just protections in general for kind of any marginalized group impact disabled people and access to education.
Absolutely.
And, so that I think one of the things to be totally scattered in my thoughts and true to self is if I go back to the beginning of the year, I think what I really noticed really differently than I had in previous years
Mm-hmm.
was almost like this extremism,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I feel like you and I talked about this. I don't know if we've talked about it recorded anywhere, but I know we've had this conversation of there were teams that were showing up almost with the attitude of like, well, fuck it. The rules are there are no rules. So let's just do the thing that we know needs to be done for this young person. Let's join arms. Let's join hands. Let's get creative. Let's do the thing. Like, Big Brother isn't watching. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
fuck it. Let's throw out the rule book. Right. And I was like, yes. Right. I was so here for it. And then you had like literally the extreme opposite of like, fuck it. The rules are there are no rules, and there is no oversight because we've been dismantling the federal powers that be that would provide that oversight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have to follow the rules, and I don't want to help your disabled learner, and I am going to gatekeep, and I am going to stop you, and there isn't shit you can do about it. Like, and it was just like I just felt like I was constantly being whiplashed because there would be days where I would be in a meeting with sort of like that kind of first kind of team where they were
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, let's do the thing. And then I'd have like literally a 3 minute pee break, if that. And I would come back to a different meeting with a totally different team that was like, yeah, no, we're not doing a goddamn thing. And I'm like, can I bring somebody from the previous meeting into this meeting? Because this is not what are we doing here?
No, and I 100% agree, and we've definitely talked about that. And what's wild is that someone somewhere that's listening to this or watching it on YouTube is going to be like, "Oh yeah, because in this state they're more progressive, or this state they're more conservative," and it's not even by state.
No.
We're talking about in the same state,
Yes.
could be the same district,
Yes.
right? But just different members of the team, and the perception and approach is different. And it was like, I just call it like whiplash because you're right. With the amount of meetings that we do in a day or in a week, you can kind of, unless it's a new team you've never met with, right? You can kind of see based on any communication prior to the meeting, right? Like you can kind of get a sense of like how it's going to go. But sometimes, and what the parent tells you too, sometimes you get in the meeting and just because, and I've had parents say that, like, oh, Destiny, it's never been that collaborative. It's just because you were there, right? So we have those moments where it's like
Sure.
just because we're there, it's collaborative and we get things solved, we get things done. Great, checks box, learner gets what they need, access, awesome. But then there's times too where I had like families I've been with for 3 years and never had an issue, been in the same school for the last 2 years. And now all of a sudden we've had 3 or 4 IEP meetings this year, and normally we only have one annual. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where if you guys are watching, Lisa's looking and noticing her dog on the couch, which is hilarious because she kind of just climbed on up there minding her business. Um, but one of the things is just that it's things that we didn't previously see, that there weren't previously issues, and now there are. And I think when you talk about that extremism, one of the things that I have said frequently throughout our podcast, that I say all the time to my families and all the time to you personally, is like there's a lot of black or white thinking, right? And so for
Right.
us, really, like school systems really want learners to not have black or white thinking, but we're seeing a lot of teams with that approach where, like you said, I had teams that were kind of like, well, you know what? If this is what the learner needs, we're going to do it. We're accepting all your recommendations, all your changes. We're going to do this. We're going to put it down. We're going to implement it. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing the learner thrive. We're seeing it be amazing. And then teams that are like, yeah, we're not doing shit you said. We're doing it the way that we want to do it. We're patting ourselves on the back about how we're doing it, and that's how it's going to be. And so I think for me, and I want to know for you, for me, it was like, as from an advocate standpoint, I had to really like start regulating myself more before meetings and after meetings than I previously had to,
Oh yeah.
because we are there to be the less emotional, more objective piece to support our parents, but we care about our parents, we care about their learners, and we care about their access to this, or we wouldn't be doing it. And so sometimes I found where I was just like, yeah, mom and dad, like you have a right to be pissed because that was bullshit.
Oh yeah, no, and I think you bring up a really important thing. I'm thinking of a specific family that I'd worked with for years. And had it been perfect? No, because there's no such thing. But it had been relatively collaborative. We moved the needle, and we had met with two of the program specialists over the summer. This young person had been in a self-contained classroom, um, like for one sort of age cohort, and they were sort of moving up into a different age cohort where that self-contained classroom wasn't available on that site. And so it was a really good opportunity, and the family really wanted more mainstreaming opportunities. And it was like, why would we take this young person and move them to a totally different school site and da da da? Let's keep them here. And so we had met with two program specialists over the summer. They were like, we had this super collaborative, yes, let's do the thing, and ba ba boop ba ba meeting. And we all left like, woo, awesome. We're going to start the year strong. And then we started the year with dog shit. The implementation completely unraveled. We were having meeting after meeting after meeting. It was so disgusting. And the sort of pinnacle moment, if you want to call it that, was the freaking team ambushed this family with an attorney. Like, didn't tell them ahead of time, didn't nothing. And I was like, talk about having to regulate yourself. Like, here I am. I'm supposed to be the ballast in the storm. I recognized the attorney and I was like, no, 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 it can't be. And talk about like an intersection. This was a family. I don't know what their immigration status was, but I do know that the parents were not born and raised in this country. English was not the first language spoken in their home. Their immigration status is none of my damn business, but like there's an intersection happening, right? And that, I am sorry, motherfucking district ambushed them with an attorney. And when I called them on it, they laughed in our faces. And I was like, the young person had been pulled out of school because there wasn't adequate support, right? Like, and so it's like in this moment, what do I do as the advocate? Because all I want to do is scream at the top of my lungs, this is so not okay. And yet, if I do that, then I almost become a cog in the wheel of the violence towards this family because it will force them into a binary decision, not that the district isn't almost doing that on their own, of they either need to somehow seek legal representation, which is not accessible to most folks, and or they pull their kid out, or yeah, and or they pull their kid out, right? But because this learner wasn't accessing school at the moment, it was like, I don't feel comfortable making that decision for them right now. I need it documented what this district is doing. Um, let's see if we can't have a somewhat productive meeting, if that's even humanly possible. But like, and it was, we did, but then at the end, I'm like, hate to come back to the elephant in the room, but is this the district's plan moving forward to continue to bring legal representation to these meetings? And they literally fell out laughing. And I was like, that's not an answer. And so they're like, we'll let you know. And I just wanted to say, mm-hmm. And so, the family ended up, and I get it, the family ended up pulling their kid out of school. And they established their own like homeschool charter. And they're like, bye-bye, I'm out. And it took me, like, I felt like I had failed them. The anger I had at that district, and I had worked with them for years and years, and I have other families in that district. And I'm like, you're going to have to do some work to get yourself into a better regulated space to be able to show up for the other families that you work with. And, if you have to interact with some of the same staff, certainly at the district level, like you can't show up and be like, I'm still pissed off about what you did over there, except I am still pissed off about what you did over there. Like you've shown me who you are, and I believe you.
No, I think what you're naming too is like one, ambushing the family is just shitty. And I think we've seen that happen, which is where, we've had episodes about like ego, right? And like bias but we've seen it in gaslighting. Like we have seen it happen in different ways where, you know, oh, we don't have a draft for you to review, comes in, a whole draft is presented on the screen. And I'm just like, or sent a draft and it had like 2 bits of information and it was basically sent because they have an advocate coming and the advocate wrote the email very clearly and requested this and that they sent. Gets in there, it's not what we saw anyway, so now we're extending the meeting anyway. We're not going to talk about this. We're going to have the meeting when we want to have the meeting that doesn't benefit the family. But what you're also talking about on that advocacy side and that shift of things that we've seen kind of unprecedented like in this year is the give a fuck. Like as in
Right?
like school districts literally, and that's why it always gets me, and I say this, and I made a reel, and I always like find a way to weave this in probably every month into my social media content about how Lisa and I will get these comments that will just be like, no school district is doing that, and no administrator would ever do that, no special education teacher would ever do, no parent would ever do, and I'm like, da 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 da, whatever. This is life, and it's happening. And most importantly, there's other professionals, other administrators and educators who are telling me, you wouldn't believe the stuff I see every day, right? And I'm trying to fight against that, and I'm trying to change that situation, that conversation, that narrative. And so, and they're telling me that as the school staff. And I think what you're saying too is like, as advocates, right? Us having to shift. Like, I'll have a meeting that is phenomenal. Like, I'm just like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Sometimes I'm like, you did that. Pat myself on the back if you're watching me on YouTube. Like, I'm like, my family's following up and they're like, thank you so much. And like, we got the things and we did the things. And like, I did a meeting yesterday. And at the end of the meeting, like, the director was like, thank you so much, Dr. Huff, for your insight. I really think that's going to help us really put a great program in place for this learner. And sometimes that thanking you is coming from a like, whoo, you were collaborative, right? Like you didn't come in here like attacking us or saying we're doing things wrong. And then sometimes it's that genuine, like I said, how I come in the room virtually as I am neurodivergent, I am disabled, I am autistic, I am ADHD, I am a mother, I am a mental health professional. Like I bring all those pieces and communicate all those pieces. And so they know that they're getting at least some. And I would say you met one autistic person, you met one ADHDer, we met one ADHDer, but I'm bringing those different pieces in as like mother and professional, right? And advocate. And so, you can tell they're genuinely thankful for like the insight that's kind of shaping how they're getting it, that information to support that learner. But we will go from something like that to a meeting where you're told you don't know how to write goals, or I'm no longer speaking because of how you're talking, or we need to stop this meeting and we need to have a state facilitator, or you go into those meetings. And I think in my couple of years that I've been doing this, I think this is year 4. Still, I would say I'm still a baby to the advocacy world. But in the short time I've been doing it, this year was really the first year where I did feel like I had to start spacing out my meetings a little more. I had to, okay, I've got 3 in a day. Maybe that's all I'm doing today. Because you could think everything was good to go. You could think there was a good plan in place, and then you'd have an incident occur that would upend everything and everyone. and now you feel like you're starting back from scratch. And I'm talking about this happening like now in like April and May, where we're closing out the school year, and things have been good for 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I'm laughing to myself because I have a teeny tiny team of two wonderful humans that help me with all the tech side of stuff. Because as we've said a million times, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And so I just met with him the other day, and I was like, I would like to be Destiny when I grow up. Sorry, she just took a drink and she almost spit it out. But I was like, Destiny is so good at like recognizing you're so good. I'll just say it to you. You are so good at recognizing your own capacity and advocating for yourself and saying, hey, I've reached the limit. I can't do the thing, whatever it is, right? And as we both know, tech skills are not the only thing I'm lacking. Recognizing my own capacity and acting on it is also an area of growth for me. If I had an IEP, it would say Lisa needs to work on this skill for sure. And so, it's like I need to be better about spacing my meetings out. I've always tried, it doesn't always work, but I have tried to like leave a window, even if it's a few minutes after a meeting, just to be able to like touch base with the family immediately following. But it's really horrible when like that can't happen. And sometimes my planning is terrible. I have had in the last couple of weeks multiple days where I've had 4 IEP meetings plus multiple parent meetings, but right where it's like boom, boom, bing, bong, boom, bang, boom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's my name? Where am I? What did I say I was supposed to do? Like party on top, jammies on the bottom. Like, how are we doing here, folks? Right? Like, have I eaten? Have I had anything to drink? Like, where am I? Um, and so I'm not as good about that. But no, you triggered something. I don't even know if I told you this. I had a meeting with a team in a district that, is lacking resources, lacking infrastructure. They really quote unquote don't know how to IEP in many ways, except most of the staff, not all. And I've sat at multiple teams at different schools. Most of the folks show up and give a shit. So I can like get past the other stuff, right? And so I had a meeting with them the other day, and it was like a part two to a triennial. And I really like the case manager. Like, I just think she's a doll. And at the end of it, she was like, Lisa, I just have to thank you so much. Your questions are so good. They help me think so much. They've been so beneficial to this I was like, and so I said to her, I was like, you're in a party of one feeling that way. Like, cracking up laughing. But she was like, no, like, it's so beneficial to this process. But like, literally the next day, 2 days later, whatever, I'm getting in some garbage, you know, match with some Yahoo telling the family, we already talked about this. This conversation's over. You are not allowed to ask any more questions. And I'm like, sir, slow your roll. So he's not thanking me for my questions.
You know what is funny is I think too, the SPED director was like, thank you so much. I'm pretty sure she was the same one in the county last year that when we had the initial, because this is one of my families where they are really good at supporting, but also I would say like, it's always like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Because this is one where the family brought me in from the special ed evaluation. So from the beginning, we were having conversations about what does it look like for this learner to access this setting, these settings with what supports, whatever. So we started off the jump with like, and it was a very individualized type program that we created for this learner. But it's also a smaller county. And what's interesting in that is that because it is smaller, they're used to contracting with providers. And so already
Sure.
having providers readily available to support the learner in conjunction with the school was like a no-brainer, because they were like, oh yeah, because we're smaller, so we have to do that
Right. Sure.
anyway.
We outsource this.
Right. So we had already created this very unique piece. And it's like, I think she was the same one last year. He was like, thank you so much. You like have made this. But it's like, again, that goes back to our advocacy, but that's another layer though of showing like what we experience when we support our families and what we step into the meeting with, and how we are collaborative and we are like, let's work together. And you still will get these, for a better lack of words, just like negative interactions. And it's really just a lot of ego of just like, you're not going to come in here and tell us what to do. And the reason why we say it's ego is because once you start doing that, the learner is not at the forefront. It's not about the learner. It is
100%.
absolutely about you wanting your way. And I've had several times where I've had to say, hey, I think we're getting off track here. I
Yeah.
think we're all in agreement that we want the learner to access the setting, to be successful, this or that. And I'll say, like, I think there may be some disagreement on what is required to do that.
Sure.
But like, let's try and find a meet in the middle and kind of walk through and discuss, right? And sometimes I think when you're in rooms where maybe ego got to the forefront, but they are willing to adjust, right? And I think we've both seen that in real time where they kind of take a step back and they're like, oh shit, right? Like, I'm not going to say you're right, right? But you see the shift in the communication and the interaction where they're like, yeah, I did get a little about this is how I'm gonna do things. And I was in the room the other day where we kind of went in, and parents from the beginning were like, we don't feel like they're seeing X, Y, and Z. And we feel like it comes all across in this learner's testing. And so they are documenting this, but then it's still being considered like this willful defiance. And, just they're being lazy or manipulative. If you're not watching
Right.
YouTube, Lisa's taking deep breaths because she knows that
I'm like, I
she
can't.
she knows also that I'm talking about an ADHDer, because that's where that always tends to come in there, is that like they're just choosing and they're whatever. And so one of the things I did when we got in there, I immediately switched the conversation to executive functioning. And for the
Right.
remainder of the meeting, that's what the conversation circled around. And as I said to parents, I said, you could see them making the connections between this learner's testing. But had I not put that at the forefront, it very much would have been about independence. Whereas we're seeing that
Yeah.
they have kind of, essentially, it's a very interesting, and I actually haven't seen this as often. They've kind of disregarded executive functioning, but acknowledge that the learner needs support, so much so that there's a lot of prompt dependence. And now we're going to middle school.
Gotcha.
And so it's like they have been doing so many things to support while saying they want this learner to be independent, but not teaching them executive functioning supports to use. And so now they've created the monster, right? And when I'm talking about monster, I'm not talking about a person. They've created this situation that they don't now know how to undo because they didn't address the elephant in the room. So it's very interesting, but I've walked into situations like that where I can tell, as I was saying, and I always say for me as a mental health professional, there's always one person that's going to end up probably getting the brunt of my knowledge. And what I mean by that is there's going to be one person, unfortunately, where I have the most questions for, and I'm in a way of actually questioning what they've communicated to the parents or what they've documented.
Right.
And sometimes that's the speech language pathologist because it's pragmatics. Sometimes that's the OT because it's sensory based. Sometimes that's the mental health professional because it's counseling, or it's the psychology piece, which all of my degrees are in psychology.
Right.
And so that's what happened here. And as I explained to parents, like there was a shift in the direction of getting documented what we needed documented and checking boxes and getting them to understand and see where we're coming from. But there was also very clearly this, you could like physically see the recoil of like feeling like they were being questioned and like what they were saying wasn't valid. And it wasn't valid. But and it wasn't valid because it was like an outdated view of executive functioning. It was an outdated view of how to support ADHDers and where that support lies and what that support looks like. And
Right.
so, but that's kind of, that wave and that ride that I've been on this advocacy year. It's like going from the director going like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. Like, thank you so much, to, like, oh, I'm gonna have to challenge you, to you don't know what you're doing. Like, I'm like, oh, okay.
You're like, all of those things potentially could be true, but maybe not.
Right.
I don't know if you could sense my climb up to my soapbox while you were talking earlier. I was like getting up the ladder and going up to the top of the soapbox to address the whole independence thing. Here's my where I get stuck. And I have given some version of this spiel in a lot of meetings, but I do feel like it's upticking in the last year. And that is the difference between focusing on independence and focusing on autonomy and agency and self-determination. And right, like, I know folks aren't thinking about it deep enough. They're just like, well, the purpose of the IEP is for them to be independent and no longer need an IEP. How many times have you heard that this year?
Oh my God. I heard that in that
This
same meeting
morning.
I just talked about. And parents were like, and then when I followed up, I do a follow-up email and I provide notes and I give my thoughts. And I said, yeah, and to be clear, that's an outdated way of thinking
Uh-huh.
about IEPs. And the parent was like, okay, because I was thinking to myself, there's going to be executive functioning barriers for the rest of his life. And there's going to be this and that. And I was like, and I say this not to like say like, that your learner will be on an IEP forever. I say this in case, because I have parents that will go, oh my gosh, maybe it's not working, maybe it's not helpful, maybe it's not effective because he's still on it in 10th grade. And I'm like, no, that's not what that means.
No. And I think the thing is that, like, it's not binary. But if you want to empower a young person to grow into an autonomous adult, you have to equip them with like the internalized belief that their intuition matters, that their voice matters, that their perspective matters, that they're entitled to things like agency and dignity and right, like
I'm not
and
wrong every time I open my mouth. I'm not wrong when I say something is bothering me. I'm not wrong when I say that I don't feel like I can do this. I'm not wrong when I ask for help. I'm
no,
not wrong.
no. And there's nothing wrong with needing help or needing an accommodation or saying, hey, I'm at capacity, my cup runneth over in all the wrong ways. I need to hit pause, excuse you me, for a moment or 12 days
Mhm.
or longer. Right? Like to me, I my hope for all the learners that I'm working with and beyond are able more and more and more throughout their lives to be able to advocate for themselves in whatever situation they may be in, to be like, this is the kind of thing that doesn't work for me. So it's a pass, but thanks for asking, right? This is the kind of thing I know I have to be able to do or I have to access for whatever reason. And we could laundry list a million different things, right? But I'm going to need certain tools in place to be able to do so, right? I'm going to need to do these things ahead of time. I'm going to need to do these things while I'm there, and this is what respite and recovery is going to look like for me after the fact, right? Like focusing solely on independence, like there's something inherently broken in you that you need this accommodation. And oh heavens to Betsy, you're getting too old for this accommodation, and you're going to be a fifth grader next year, or you're going to be a sixth grader, whatever garbage, ableist crap, made up age shit that we stack on top of this to make kids feel terrible about themselves, right? Like, it's not helpful. Me as the adult pressuring you that, like, oh, you're a big boy now in third grade. You shouldn't need the fill in the blank, the comfort item, right? Like, well, what does my age have anything to do with it? Number one. And number two, if we normalize that difference is just part of the human experience, and who gives a shit if somebody has a stuffy when they're in third, right? Like, I had high school learners when I was teaching that sucked their thumbs during tests. And so I used to put up like dividers so everybody had like personal space. And if you needed to suck your thumb or pull out your, plushie or whatever it was that made you feel safe, like, good, go with God. Way to take care of yourself. That's fantastic. What the fuck do I care? Right? Like, I just feel like we're not, for lack of a better way of putting it, when we focus on independence, we're actually not focusing on helping learners build those skills and that strong sense of self to be able to navigate the world with more autonomy. Right?
Because
And it's
we
just
don't
so
want
ableist. Like,
independence. They don't want independence. They want compliance.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be able to fade, right? I mean, if I have heard lately so many times, like, we just want to get them off an IEP. And I'm like,
And that's so ironic to me as somebody who is very literal. Because I'm like, you want to get them off an IEP, but you're not doing what would get them off an IEP. You get what I'm saying? Because like
yes.
the conversation I mean, of course I know you. But the conversation I'm constantly having is like, and this is to my parents too. I'm like, look, 504s are to provide accommodations to remove barriers to access. I'm like, IEPs are to teach skills, to provide explicit instruction in areas where they need to learn a skill. And what I often find is that learners have IEPs that are teaching them no fucking skills other than complying. And I'm like, so you want them to get off an IEP, but you're not actually teaching them how to regulate. You're not teaching them how to self-advocate. You're not teaching them how to be autonomous. You're not teaching them how to communicate their wants and needs. You're not teaching them how to access the mode of communication that works best for them depending on whether they're regulated or dysregulated. You're doing none of that, but you want them off the IEP. Okay.
Right.
And I'm on my soapbox.
Right. Well, and I think the other piece, there's just so many layers of ableism. I can't take it.
So many layers. I'm proud of you because I thought you were going to say so many layers of ableist bullshit. But
That too.
you just said ableism. I'm
I
so proud of
cleaned
you.
it up because it's been such a clean place, this whole
I know. I
conversation.
think this is the
I like
most
came out of the
words we've
gate
said in an
swinging.
episode. We just threw it to the wind. Like capacity is fighting for its life right now.
I fell asleep at 7 something last night. I could not, like, full transparency to all of you who are listening.
And I went to sleep at 1 o'clock because I was up doing homework, and so I couldn't take my sleep meds till 11, and those don't kick in until 2 hours later. So Lisa and I are fighting for our life.
We are fighting for our lives. I could
record.
not cook dinner last night. I could not function. I could not put one foot in front of the other. I made a smoothie. I drank it in my chair with my heated blanket, and I fell asleep before 7:30.
I love that for you.
It was good times. And then I woke up like all in a stupor, and like my husband's like, "What are you doing?" I don't know. Surviving, not thriving.
No, but I mean, I think to direct back, don't forget we're ADHD around here. So y'all know why that just went off where it went. But then the autism's bringing it back. To
Thank
bring
you.
it
I
back,
appreciate that.
something shifted this year, and it I think the current administration really put schools, districts, educators, related service providers, administrators, parents, learners in a tailspin.
Yeah, I agree.
They're just, there's so much up and down. Like this is what are the things he releases?
His executive orders or
His
his
executive orders. Like this is an
his
executive order,
sundowning
and then
tweets or twits or whatever the
right,
hell he's
which
doing in the
mean
middle of the night.
nothing in the scheme of like actual law and what's taking place. And then you have to like look into that though, because then you have those that can make it law and can make it policy, and then you have some that are just taking those things and going ahead and going, okay, this gives me the go ahead, the green flag, the check mark to make this practice. And you know and I know Lisa and I, we have families that we support that where the learners consider quote unquote behavior. And so there's a lot of dysregulation. And so we're seeing a lot of states that are coming in and making this protect the teacher bullshit laws that actually protect no one and just discriminate against disabled learners and don't take the time to actually teach skills and do the things that should support teachers, which is decrease class sizes and do training that's actually relevant. And so I think it was just that whiplash of us knowing the Individuals with Disability Education Act is still very much there and having to continuously remind schools and districts as non-attorneys that it's very much still there.
Yeah.
And I know that that's the piece that I kept coming up against. Like sometimes I'd make content about like, how to address this or that. And I get somebody who's inevitably going to comment and be like, well, the law didn't change. And it's like, yes. And I hope that you are sitting in a place of privilege where it's not actually impacting you so that you can say that, right? Because let's be honest, like as a parent of two disabled learners in special education, I'm actively watching the law that didn't change impact my children and their friends and their peers. And then as a non-attorney advocate, I'm actively watching the law that didn't change, right? But the things that are being said and the things that are being put into practice or policy, or some states, which we want to give it back to the states, which is stupid as fuck, seeing them actively implement things that are detrimental and harmful, looking at you, Arizona and Arkansas. And it's like in Texas, like a 5-year-old being written in their file that they've assaulted a peer and they're 5. Like we're actively seeing this in real time and supporting families in real time and having to have discussions that, in my good friend Lisa Baskin Wright's words, would have been more nuanced a year ago.
That part.
Definitely we're having to, I think, be more blunt for sure. Like I'm definitely having to write more letters that, and I don't want to say fluff because we never wrote letters with fluff, but it was prettier, right? Like you made it pretty, like you made it like, like maybe there's a misunderstanding here, and you know what I mean? And like we want to all be on the same page, collaborate. I'm definitely having to do a lot more of like, this is not okay. And this is what we would like to meet to discuss so that we can try and repair this.
Yeah. I am going to bring this up because you just triggered a little neuron in my brain. Because I do think that this is impacting sort of relationships at an IEP table, and that is AI. And I tried to talk about it a little bit on Instagram. And again, I have no tech skills. So like I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I have seen an uptick in folks using ChatGPT and Gemini, and I don't know the names of all the different things, but whatever, right? AI as essentially their advocate, right? And so they are drafting, and I get it, right? Like I'm not trying to totally slam tech. I'm really not. I even though I have no skills and it's completely dysregulating for me, and there's lots of parts of AI that really like bother me for a million reasons, right? Like where the data centers are and how we're like literally raping communities of resources and destroying the earth, right? Like I could get on a different soapbox, but I won't. I understand from an accessibility piece, right? Why folks are going that direction. And I am sure just like anything else, there's a way to use it that is helpful and you know, at kind of a low cost to the person using it and is helpful to the person using it. But just like anything, I think it's one of those things if you don't really already know like the content or the answer to the question is not helpful. Like at all. And so I have, especially in the last like month, I have had more and more and more people come to me with like, here, these are the goals that ChatGPT or Gemini, whomever, AI person, robot, said I should put forward to my team. And I'm like, oh, dear sweet baby Jesus, do not send that to the team. Right? Like, you cannot send that to the team. I had somebody send me stuff they had sent to a team and the prior written notice. So the response of the denial from the district. And they were like, I uploaded their PWN into Gemini or whatever, and this is what it said I should do. And it was all shit. I'm like, you might as well have gone into one of those Facebook groups because it was all like, file, mediation, rah! And I was like, I hate to be a bitch. I agree with the district.
Everything I get from my parents that's written by ChatGPT, I have to rewrite.
Mm-hmm.
Because, excuse me, you have to keep in mind when using it, and I am not tech savvy like my husband.
You are tech savvy, like a
but I got a little bit of tech,
oh,
and
worlds away from me, galaxies.
and the energy that you put in is what you're going to get out, right? And so if you're putting in like, which often our parents are, and we have felt as parents before too, when we didn't have access to AI, when we were going to go write something up. I mean, for goodness sake, half the stuff I write for my kids, I run it past Lisa. I'm like, was I objective? Was I, because it's my own kids, right? And so we're writing with that, like, this is where I'm at, and this happened, this or that, right? And like Lisa and I say, part of our purpose process as non-attorney advocates, our advocacy style in particular, is building bridges. And so I often have to come back to my families and say, like, what is it that you want to do? Where is it that you want to go? What route is it that you want to take? And I have to have that conversation because sometimes it becomes muddy, right? Sometimes there are areas where, and what I call them before we get into state complaint territory is I like to call them procedural and substantive concerns. And sometimes there are procedural and substantive concerns. And if you're like, I have no idea what a procedural something is or substantive something is, you need to go find out. Because I would imagine if you're listening to our podcast that you have a learner in special education, or you're supporting a learner in special education, or you will have one in special education. So I've got several pre-K families that I've talked to that have heard our podcast. You need to know what procedural and substantive violations are. But the short of it is that procedural is the process in which they do the IEP. So the way in which they handle the special education evaluation, the way in which they handle the initial IEP creation, the evaluation results, being in compliance, fidelity. And then substantive is like the actual content of the document. It's getting into, do they have SMART goals in there? Are they appropriately ambitious for the learner? Do they have all of the concerns addressed through services or accommodations? And so, but what I find is that whatever's riled up my parent is what ChatGPT is spit back out, right? And a lot of times too, it takes out that nuance of the emotion, of the context too, right? Because I've had parents that put something in, and I've gone in and tested this myself and put something in, and I'm like, that is not Georgia special education code.
Thank you. I
And
had somebody give me something and I'm like, that's not the right acronym for the state that we are in.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what that's called here. Right? Like, and the thing is, and they did submit it to the team and I was like cringing. Um, I think that what I'm worried about, and obviously in like a 3-minute reel or whatever the hell it was I did on Instagram, and I'm probably not doing a good job of it here, but what I'm really worried about is kind of the direction you're going, which is that relationship with the team. Because if my sort of hairs on the back of my neck are standing up every time I'm getting something, and it's to me, there's a difference between, like, I know my husband will use like AI for this sometimes if he has to send kind of a strongly worded email, but he's like, I don't want to get fired or I don't want to make somebody feel like shit. Like he'll draft something, stick it into whatever, and then say, like, please make this sound kinder or more collaborative or whatever. And then it takes what he wrote and softens it or whatever. And then he goes back in and like, so it's almost like an editing partner, but he knows exactly, like it's his words of what he wants to say. I wouldn't even know how to do it, but like, fine, good on him, whatever. That doesn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the like, what goals should be for executive functioning? And then it like vomits out 20 something, 30 something goals. There's like 6 goals per thing. None of them have baseline data. None of that, right? If
And
you
it
take
shows
that,
you where it got it from. And often that's very conflicting with our neuroaffirming standpoint in the first place.
very much so. And then it's like, if I'm looking at it like having heart palpitations, part of what I think, and this is circling back as I'm like popcorn all over the place, is that in this current political landscape, as we are continuing our efforts to defund public education, because this is not new, it's
Mm-hmm.
accelerated.
Mm-hmm.
There are decisions being made at IEP tables based on dollars and cents, not based on needs and accessibility, right? So that's part of the reason why we're hearing a lot of trash. That's part of the reason why you'll have folks, like I was in a meeting the other day where like the folks that were like part of the actual school team were showing up with tremendous care. And the person from the district office was like a gatekeeper. I'm just going to say that they were a gatekeeper and I'm going to leave all the commentary to the side that's in my head. But I think what we have happening is that folks are feeling that squeeze, right? They're feeling that pressure on the school side of things. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we don't change our approach, if we're showing up like this is the law and you're supposed to this and what are you doing? And like we're showing up in that like more aggressive, firm, I've had it with you kind of way, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to lose folks before we even start.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have found myself um, to a degree almost doing more caretaking, sort of naming the hard that they're facing and saying, how do we work with the resources that are available to us? Like, yes, I understand the rules of engagement. Yes, I understand what is supposed to be done. Yes, I don't respond well to bullshit at an IEP table either. Like, if I hear real fuckery, I'm going to call it. Like, it's not that
Mm-hmm.
I've softened in that regard, but I've also, like, there's a balance. And yes, there's a nuance of, like, let's ground this practice in reality and in the humanity that is sitting around this table,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like we can hold more than one thing as true at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And what I worry about with the influx of folks turning to AI as a tool to help them navigate the system is it's missing all of that. So it's coming in really non-affirming ways, but it's
Mm-hmm.
coming in not really as a substitute non-attorney special education advocate or coach. It's coming in as a substitute wannabe attorney.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And it's kind of like the issue that mental health professionals have raised over the past few years,
Mm.
as I'm a mental health professional.
Oh, I'm
People
sure.
using AI to be their therapist, and we've had several unfortunate situations
Oh, yeah.
past few years,
Horrible.
with someone losing their life because
Oh,
they
yeah.
were using AI in that regard. And so I think that what you're really getting at is that, kind of that thought process of, I was thinking about iRobot because I like that movie. And so the iRobot
Oh,
movie
yeah.
has Will Smith and, the
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
robot, like they find out the robots can actually like kind of adjust their thinking and whatever. And the one robot, he like becomes more evolved and it's a whole thing. But I like that movie. But I think about how it's just noted like that's not a replacement for a person. And I think
Right.
that we've gotten in such a bad place in the education system, the mental health system, the systems, the medical systems, all the systems, that people are seeking other alternative ways that are more financially feasible. Um,
Right.
and I really just want parents, and I have had some, and I think that's the beauty of, and I think that's a good way to kind of head towards wrapping this episode up. I have had parents reach out to me that say, like, thank you for your content. Thank you. I want to say thank you to you and Lisa for your podcast. Like, it's really helped me advocate for my child in a really great way. It's
Oh,
given me
yeah.
language I didn't previously have. And like, that's one of the reasons why we started this, is because we
Oh, for
wanted
sure.
to not have it behind a paywall and be able to give this information to make that shift in the system. And I think that, but that comes from the emotion, it comes from living it. It, as the parents, as the advocate, as disabled individuals that were identified earlier or identified later. And, I think that that is something too that became more prevalent for me this year, is that there's so much information that's misinformation.
Yeah.
And until I started being an advocate, I didn't access social media like I do now. I access it way more now, to put out information, to see what information is out there. And there's just so much misinformation. And I'm talking about from school staff and from advocates. And
Mm-hmm.
so I always just keep saying, like, do your own research, look into it for yourself. Lisa and I advocate in multiple states. And I think that's one of the things I come across the most frequently, is someone telling me, like, you're lying to parents. Like, that's not actually this. And first of all, that's federal law. Second of all, I'm like, you're referring to your state. That is not the law in other states. And a lot
Right.
of people don't know that. And they're stepping
Right.
into these groups and they're giving information
Oh,
to
yeah.
people that is not intentionally, they're not intentionally being harmful, but the
No,
end
no, no,
result is
no.
harm because it only applies to their state.
That is correct. And there is nuance there. Like there is that things vary.
California
And
has SAI. We don't have that in
right,
Georgia. It's SDI. That's it.
right. And for those that are listening, SAI is specialized academic instruction and SDI is specially designed instruction. And the Californian actually really strongly prefers, they mean essentially the same thing, but I prefer the term specially designed instruction because I think in California, people are like, well, there's no academic impact. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to pull my eyelashes out. But no, I will help you close this episode out too. And I'm going to rue the day that I say this out loud, but I, honest to God, would rather have somebody, well, obviously, I'd rather have folks listening to this podcast, and Destiny's way better than I am about putting content out. She's just way better about it. But I would rather somebody jump into my DMs and ask me a quick question or two than go to AI.
100%. 100%.
And I
Because
realize
at
that
least
I
you're
am just going
getting
back to not recognizing my own capacity or bandwidth, but honest to
right.
God, Like the
Right.
helper in me is so
Mm-hmm.
worried about the misinformation that
Mm-hmm.
I have seen come out of AI that I would rather you came into my DMs and said, "Hey, I've got a quick question about boopity bop, and let me just give you a quick answer,"
Mm-hmm.
than have you go astray, come up with a bunch of crap, think it's right, think it's sound, think it's good, submit it to a team, and unintentionally get off on the wrong foot with that team.
Mm-hmm. 100%. So, I mean, and that's because at least, and I know Lisa well enough to say this for the both of us. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know. I'm going to tell you,
My
like,
God.
this is my understanding. I'm going to tell you that. And so, do your due diligence, do your research. And I'm very interested to know with this episode, for you guys to put in the comments and let us know something that shifted for you this year. So whether you're
Yes.
the professional or the family member, the parent, the learner, like what shifted for you this year? And it can be a positive, right? I think
Totally.
for me, it was just to end on a positive. For me, it was finding my capacity. And I had to learn that the hard way. I'm autistic and ADHD, but I also have fibromyalgia and I have chronic fatigue. And there were times where I was like, I cannot get out of bed because I've pushed myself beyond my capacity. And so I had to actively look at what I was doing and what was sustainable in that regard. But also, I think too, one of the things Lisa and I talked about is that I have my children are still very much in the education system, the public school education system in elementary schools. I have many years to go on this journey. And so, because of that, they also will have days out and days off. And they're getting older and they started being like, why do you have to work instead of like spending time with us? And
Right.
when we're out and we're home. And so that also really pushed me into gear of like, okay, I can take off a day in the week when they're out and relax. So, that's something that shifted for me in a positive way of, really being forced to kind of look at my capacity. Now, don't get twisted. I still be ending up doing like 8 meetings a week and 5 meetings a day. But I've
Those are
found a
details.
way to have a day at least where I can like it's less stressful and less compacted and I can decompress.
Absolutely. Tilly is coming to say hello or goodbye, I should say.
Well, thank you guys so much, and we will see you on the last episode of season 1 of the Affirming Village podcast. Thank you again for joining us here in the Affirming Village. We're your co-hosts, Dr. Destiny Huff and Lisa Wright, and we hope today's conversation leaves you feeling seen, supported, and better equipped to advocate for yourself or your learner. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone else in the village. Until next time, keep advocating, keep affirming, and keep building the village we all deserve.